So Marjorie Taylor Greene was at this Turning Point Action event. I believe this is this the Charlie Kirk group? I think Turning Point USA or something like that. I think it's Turning Point USA. So I guess this is one of their events. You know, Charlie does these like youth events all around the country, and he has connections with many, you know, elites in the Republican Party. So Marjorie comes and gives a speech, and I love this clip for so many reasons, but the overall takeaway is she's trying to own Biden. She's trying to school Biden, but in the process of it, makes him seem so much cooler than he is. Watch this.
Lyndon B. Johnson is very similar to Joe Biden. How are they the same? They're both Democrat socialists.
They pay zero mind to the nuances of the left, you know, the colossal, gargantuan differences between like a neoliberal Democrat, like sort of the centrist-y or corporatist-y Democrats versus, you know, the New Deal style Democrat or liberal. That's sort of like social democracy proponents versus libertarian socialists or left-wing anarchists or communists, even though there's not that many of them in the U.S., right? But you know, there's some people on the Democratic base or the left-wing base, you could say, fall into that category. But there's all these different flavors and varieties of left-wing thinkers, from your run-of-the-mill status quo defending neoliberal Democrat type to your far-left anarchist type or communist or, you know, sort of moderate social democrat, New Deal Democrat type people. And to them, there's just like, that's all the same. That's all the same. To them, it's like anybody to the left of John McCain or to the left of Mitt Romney, anyone including Mitt Romney and to his left, you're all the same and you're all Democratic socialists. I have no doubt she would consider somebody like Mitt Romney or John McCain a Democratic socialist. So this is just her blasting out her own ignorance. That's what this is. That's what this is. All right, let's continue.
Lyndon B. Johnson was the majority leader in the Senate. Does that sound familiar? He was vice president to Kennedy. Joe was vice president to Obama. He was appointed as the president after JFK was assassinated. Then he was elected. His big socialist programs were the Great Society. The Great Society were big government programs to address education, medical care, urban problems, rural poverty, transportation, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, and welfare.
It sounds just like she's reading the Wikipedia page, and I gotta tell you, Marjorie, all of those things sound based. Like, hey, here are these real-world problems that we should, like, address using the power of the government, bro. Yeah. I file that under the duh category. I file that under the that's positive category. But she's bringing it up like, bro, they want to give people medical care and stuff, bro. They want to alleviate poverty. Idiots. Telling on yourself, Marjorie. You keep telling on yourself.
Medicaid, food stamps, and welfare. The Office of Economic Opportunity, and big labor and labor unions. Now, LBJ had the Great Society, but Joe Biden had Build Back Better. And he still is working on it.
I wish that was true, Marjorie. I wish that was true. The original Build Back Better deal was phenomenal. It included expanding Medicaid to like 55 years old and lowering all prescription drug prices, not just some prescription drug prices. It had so many provisions that were awesome. It would have been the biggest transformation of the U.S. economy since the New Deal. First of all, we got the Inflation Reduction Act. We didn't get Build Back Better. Inflation Reduction Act was like 15% or 20% of what was in Build Back Better. That's the first point. Second point is he's not actually fighting for it anymore. But you make him sound so much cooler than he is. I wish he was still fighting for those things. I would be the most enthusiastic Biden supporter of all time if he was still fighting for those things. And you're comparing it to the Great Society. Again, I think it's too kind to say, you know, Biden is like LBJ. I think in many ways, LBJ's policy record is better. I mean, actually, that's not necessarily true because on the foreign policy front, it's more complicated. I think Joe is more anti-war than LBJ was. LBJ continued to escalate the war in Vietnam. Joe Biden got us out of Afghanistan, massively, massively reduced the drone war, for example. So actually on foreign policy, I think Biden might be a little bit better. But on domestic policy, I think LBJ definitely wins on that one. Because, you know, the war on poverty and the Great Society, this was phenomenally successful according to the numbers. And she's just acting like, well, they're the same, and both of these things are socialism, and they're bad.
Largest public investment in social infrastructure and environmental programs that is actually finishing what FDR started, that LBJ expanded on, and Joe Biden is attempting to complete.
I wish, Barbie. I wish, conservative Barbie, far-right Barbie. Jesus Christ. So in her mind, it's like FDR started it with the New Deal, the Great Society, LBJ continued it, and now Biden is trying to get it across the finish line. No. Biden is certainly the furthest left president of my lifetime, but that's like being the tallest kid in kindergarten. You know who really would have tried to complete that work? Bernie Sanders. If you try to get Medicare for all, if you try to get free college, if you try to get a living wage and a right to a union, yeah, in that instance, I would say you're continuing in that tradition. But Biden is like sort of still in the neoliberal tradition, but on the left edge of it. You understand what I'm saying? And so, but she's just sort of smashing it all together and is like, well, bro, just like FDR. Well, Marjorie, I don't know if you know this, but FDR consistently ranks in the top 5 U.S. presidents of all time. Some lists have him as the best president of all time. She's acting like this is owning Biden to compare him to FDR and LBJ.
Joe Biden is attempting to complete socialism. Meanwhile, we are now $32 trillion in debt.
None of them know how the national debt works. Literally none of them know how the national debt works. None of them. They can't tell you the first thing about Keynesianism. They can't tell you the first thing about MMT. They're utterly clueless. They think that the national debt functions like it's a personal household budget. This is what they believe. If you're going to comment on the deficit and the debt, for the love of God, at least know a little bit about it so you don't say dumb things like this and expose yourself.
Record high homelessness, 40-year record inflation.
Actually, inflation has been down. It just went down massively, but thanks for playing.
We're losing our freedoms.
She just talked about losing our freedoms when she was just saying she thinks pornography should be illegal. We covered the story not that long ago. She's in favor of making online pornography illegal. By the way, is she against the war on drugs? Does she want to legalize marijuana? Is that her view? Don't talk about freedom when your positions are deeply, deeply anti-freedom. She's like a Christian nationalist, okay? You can't be a Christian nationalist and say you're pro-freedom. Those things are completely at odds. You have to pick one or the other.
Our government is one big, fat, bloated machine, and it's killing the American dream.
For those of you who don't know, under Joe Biden, there's been 200,000 jobs that have been onshored instead of offshored. Trump ran as I'm the anti-outsourcing guy, and there was a net loss of jobs under his administration. Under Biden, net onsourcing of jobs. Okay. Is she going to tell you that? Of course not going to tell you that. Of course not. She's a narrative humper. And a Democrat bad, Republican good. And that's why she can own herself like this by comparing Biden to LBJ and FDR. That is the best compliment I've ever heard of Joe Biden. And honestly, I don't think he's deserving. I really don't. I think that overall, certainly FDR was a way better president. And even LBJ domestically was a better president. So this is, by the way, I think there was some, maybe the Lincoln Project or some group that's generally pro-Democrat that released this as an ad for Joe Biden. And honestly, I think that's correct. I think this is the best ad you could ever cut. It's like she brings this up, but it just goes to show you the deep bubble that she's in. In her mind, in her world, it's like this is a devastating attack launched against Biden. But in the real world, in Normieville, this is like, if you know anything about the history of, LBJ signed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. On that alone, this is like, very famously, they said the Democratic Party just lost the South for a generation when they signed that. But it was a moral, principled stand. And by the way, LBJ was personally racist, but he still signed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. Okay. Anybody who knows anything about these people know you're being, this is a massive compliment to Biden. So if anything, just thank Marjorie Taylor Greene for her service. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.